There are people we part ways with, but they never quite leave, not from the psyche, not from the bloodstream of memory. Their name softens over time, but their presence, strangely, sharpens, as if they're not gone, as if they became something else inside you. Why can't you stop thinking about them, even when it wasn't love in the traditional sense, even when the relationship was fleeting, incomplete, or never fully formed? What if your mind isn't clinging to the person, but to what you were becoming in their presence? There are certain people who don't stay as partners. They remain as portals. In Jungian psychology, relationships are seen not just as emotional bonds, but as psychic containers. When you meet someone who mirrors your hidden self, your unconscious begins to project onto them the parts of you that haven't yet come alive. These figures, especially the ones you can't forget, often carry your inner opposites. The wild one, the soft one, the sovereign, the sensual, the one who finally felt. Carl Jung called this the anima and the animus, the inner feminine in a man, the inner masculine in a woman. But beyond gender, these are the images we carry of what we're not allowed to be. And when someone walks into our lives carrying that image, we don't just fall for them, we fall into ourselves. Joe Dispenza adds another layer. He teaches that repeated thought, when paired with elevated emotion, creates energetic and neurological conditioning. In other words, the more you feel and think about someone, the more your nervous system locks in that emotional state. You become biologically tied to what they awakened. But here's the miracle hidden inside the ache. If they triggered a becoming in you, this loop you're stuck in isn't just obsession. It might be initiation, not a call to return to the past, but a call to reclaim the part of you they helped bring forward. The soul doesn't cling to people. The soul clings to symbols of transformation, and some people, even when they disappear, still echo as mirrors, not of who they were, but of who you were, just beginning to be. There is a specific kind of ache that doesn't scream, it hums, a soft, persistent presence in the background of thought. You wake, and they are there, not with you, but in you. This is not obsession for its own sake. It's memory tied to meaning, longing fused with the sense of something that almost became, but didn't. Sometimes the soul doesn't miss the person. It misses the version of you that was coming alive in their presence. There was a moment, maybe short, maybe silent, where you felt like more than yourself, more radiant, more embodied, more courageous or more free. Something unnamed within you cracked open and light came through. And now, in their absence, the grief isn't only for them. It's for the doorway they represented, a doorway into your own becoming. Carl Jung would say this is projection, but not in the trivial sense, not a mistake of perception. Projection to Jung is a sacred function of the unconscious. We place onto others what we cannot yet see within ourselves. And when the projection is vivid, so is the emotional bond. You weren't just drawn to them. You were drawn to the part of you that recognized itself in their eyes. That spark wasn't theirs, it was yours, finally catching fire. Joe Dispenza explains that the brain doesn't distinguish between real and imagined emotion when it comes to wiring neural circuits. So when someone catalyzes you, wakes up a new state of aliveness, you begin to associate them with that state. Even after they're gone, the body searches for that sensation, and because it doesn't know how to recreate it on its own, it clings to the image of the one who once unlocked it. But this isn't a call to return to them, it's a call to remember who you were becoming, a call to retrieve what you projected, to take back the flame. So ask gently, in the privacy of your heart, what part of me was trying to come alive? Who was I starting to be when I was seen by them? Because the person may be gone, but the becoming is still possible, and it was never truly theirs to give you. It was only waiting for your permission. There is a myth that quietly takes hold in the ache of longing, a belief whispered in spiritual language, dressed in signs and dreams. If I can't stop thinking about them, If they keep appearing in visions, if my heart won't release them, it must mean something divine. But sometimes what we call destiny is simply projection that has not yet been reclaimed. Carl Jung warned us, the psyche does not easily let go of what it has not integrated. Fixation is not always sacred. It is often the soul's way of clinging to an unprocessed symbol. The more intense the obsession, the more likely it is that something within you was awakened and then left incomplete. Joe Dispenza, looking through the lens of neuroscience, reminds us, what you think about repeatedly, especially with heightened emotion, becomes embedded in the nervous system. The brain wires around the emotional state, so it's not just your heart that feels stuck, it's your biology. Longing becomes a feedback loop. Each thought of them recreates the state they once evoked. And the more you visit that state, the more your body believes it needs them to feel alive. But destiny is not dependency, and the soul does not need another human to complete its journey, only to awaken it. The question then is not whether they are your soulmate. It is whether the self that was emerging in their presence has been left orphaned. There is a quiet shift that happens when we turn the focus inward. Not why am I still thinking about them, but what version of me was being born and what does it need now to survive? Not all who stay in your thoughts are meant to stay in your life. Some are mirrors that fractured open your future self. And if you mistake the mirror for the path, you may lose the very self they came to show you. Letting go does not always mean forgetting. Sometimes it means honoring the message, without needing the messenger to return. There is a moment, often long after they're gone, when clarity begins to flicker, not as a certainty but as a soft reversal of meaning. Maybe they weren't meant to stay. Maybe they weren't your person, only your reflection. Some people don't come to build a life with you. They come to reveal a life within you that you had forgotten how to see. Jung's vision of the psyche is built on this paradox. What we seek in others is often a projection of our own unlived potential. When someone walks into your world carrying a frequency your soul remembers but your mind cannot name, it feels like destiny, but it may only be a mirror, clear, brief, and unforgettable. The danger is this: when a mirror shows you beauty, aliveness, or depth you didn't know you carried, you may mistake the mirror for the source. They didn't give you what you lacked. They reflected what was dormant. And yet we build stories. We create futures around the image in the mirror, believing that reflection is real, that it must walk with us, love us, stay with us. But a mirror doesn't promise permanence. It only offers recognition. Joe Dispenza would say, all transformation begins with awareness. So when someone awakens a part of you that had been asleep, that moment becomes a seed. The mistake isn't in feeling. The pain comes from holding onto the mirror instead of planting the seed. What if they were never meant to stay? What if their purpose was to reintroduce you to your own light? We often say, we can't let someone go. But perhaps what we're truly afraid of is forgetting the version of ourselves they allowed us to briefly become. When the mirror is gone, its image still belongs to you. And integration begins the moment you stop chasing them and start becoming what they once reflected. Not every persistent memory is emotional. Some are somatic, living in the folds of your nervous system, beneath the skin of thought. When someone awakens a part of you you've never lived before, a freer, wilder, softer, or more sovereign self, your body responds before your mind understands. There is a certain chemistry between soul and sensation. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes not as abstract symbols, but as forces that live through us, shaping our instincts and desires. So when a person enters your life carrying the energy of your hidden archetype, your divine feminine, your untamed animus, your forgotten child, something ancient inside you lights up, not because of them, but because of what they represent. Joe Dispenza reminds us that every emotionally charged experience wires itself into the nervous system. When thought and emotion are repeated, they create a neurochemical identity. You don't just remember the person, you remember the state. The moment your body learned, this is freedom, or this is aliveness, or perhaps this is the first time I felt seen. Now the body wants that feeling back, and because the memory of the person is associated with that state, the mind keeps circling, keeps returning, keeps looping, not because it needs them, but because it hasn't yet learned how to feel that state without them. What lingers is not always heartbreak. Sometimes it's a biological echo of an unmet self. A self that was briefly activated and then abandoned again in their absence. The soul knows the difference between love and awakening, but the body, in its simplicity, binds the two together. And so, integration becomes not just emotional, but embodied. To reclaim the archetype they carried, to let the nervous system feel that same aliveness without needing their presence, is how the soul begins to calm. Because what you truly miss is not the person. It's the version of you that felt possible when they arrived. And that version is still waiting, not in the past, but in the present moment, where it was first awakened. There are moments when words do not need to be spoken aloud, only written slowly, like remembering something you never meant to forget. This is not a letter to them, it is a letter to you, to the version of you that appeared in their presence, like a figure emerging from fog, the one who laughed with abandon, the one who finally said what had been silent for years, the one who dared to feel. When someone enters your life and reflects a dormant part of your soul, it's not just a relationship that forms, a mirror is born. And that mirror holds an image of you that feels more true than what came before. But when they leave, the mirror often leaves with them, and the part of you that came alive in their light begins to fade again, as if it were never real. Jung taught that healing requires the retrieval of projections, that we must take back what we gave away in the faces of others and rehouse it in the self. Joe Dispenza affirms that writing can create new neural pathways. Each word becomes a signal, retraining the brain, inviting the body to remember that aliveness is still possible here, now, without the person who once ignited it. So this is not a love letter. It is a letter of return, not to them, but to you. Write to the one you were with them. Describe what you felt, how you changed, what began to breathe in you for the first time. Let the memory become a bridge, not to the past, but to the self you glimpsed through their eyes. This act is symbolic. It reclaims the mirror. It says you were real. I saw you. You are still here. Because that version of you was never lost. It was only waiting for you to make space. Not through longing, but through remembrance. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Some people don't just enter our lives, they enter our mythology. They do not speak to us as ordinary individuals, but as living symbols. And without realizing it, they awaken a role that had long been vacant within us. In Jungian psychology, this role is called the archetype, timeless, collective patterns that live beneath the surface of all relationships, the savior, the wounded healer, the abandoner, the liberator. They are not merely people. They are carriers of stories the soul needs to remember or resolve. When someone stays lodged in your thoughts long after they've left your life, it may be because the archetype they embodied has not yet been integrated. You are not clinging to a person. You are still circling a pattern. They may have been the first to make you feel chosen, the first to make you feel wild, or the first to reflect your pain with devastating clarity. That feeling wasn't accidental. It was archetypal. Joe Dispenza says identity is the result of repeated states. So when someone steps into your life as an archetype, your nervous system starts organizing itself around the version of you they awaken, and that version becomes tethered to their image. But no one can hold your archetype forever. They are not meant to carry the story, only to activate it. The obsession ends not when they leave your thoughts, but when you step into the role yourself. If they were the liberator, ask what part of your life still longs to be freed. If they were the healer, ask where your own wounds want to become wisdom. Because the moment you become the archetype you once saw in them, the fixation softens, the projection dissolves, and the mirror returns home. You no longer need the figure to return, because the figure was always you, waiting behind the veil of someone else's face. Sometimes it's not the person we can't let go of, it's the pedestal we place them on, and the version of ourselves we became just to stay close to their myth. Idealization begins quietly, not as deception, but as longing. A longing so deep that the soul pours its unmet beauty into another's form. They become not just someone, we make them sacred, not through truth, but through projection. They hold everything we forgot we carried. In Jungian terms, this is the inflation of the image. We place our gold, the parts of us we have not yet owned, into the hands of another, and in doing so we become small. We make them divine and turn ourselves into shadows, orbiting their light. Joe Dispenza reminds us that you cannot create a new life while emotionally anchored to the past. But when we idealize someone, we don't just stay in the past. We get trapped in a version of the future that was never real, a future built on someone else's imagined perfection. Every new connection now feels dull by comparison, not because they lack depth, but because they are not competing with a human. They are competing with a symbol, and symbols are seductive. They don't age, they don't disappoint, they don't betray. They stay frozen in the emotional memory of who you once hoped they were. But the more divine we make another, the more fragmented we become. Because the soul cannot thrive in worship, it thrives in wholeness. To idealize someone is to exile the parts of ourselves we saw reflected in them. It is to say, you are beauty, I am the beholder. But in truth, what you loved most was not them. It was what you saw of yourself through them. There is a quiet ritual, an unspoken turning point, to bring the myth back down to earth, not with resentment, not with rejection, but with reverence. Because what you saw in them was never false. It was simply yours, on loan, waiting to be returned to its rightful place within you. She hadn't seen him in years, not in life, not in messages, not even in the places they used to pass like shadows at the edge of something unnamed. But every full moon he returned, not in body, in dream. He would appear just before dawn, sometimes saying nothing, sometimes just looking at her with the same quiet recognition he used to carry in real life, as if he saw a version of her she had long since forgotten. At first, she thought it meant something, a sign, a soul connection, maybe even a second chance written in some unseen script. She began reading into the dreams, journaling every detail, searching the sky for messages, reading old notes, replaying old conversations. But the ache remained, and with it, a question she didn't yet know how to ask. Until one night, the silence of the dream shifted. And in that stillness she heard it, not his voice, but her own. "He's not calling you," it whispered. "You are." She woke trembling, not with fear, but with a feeling of return, of something inside her coming home. It wasn't him her soul had been asking for. It was the self she had once become in his presence, the self who had dared to speak without shrinking, to want without shame, to feel fully. She stopped writing to him and began writing to her. The woman she became when he saw her clearly, the one who had gone silent the moment he left. She wrote not to heal the memory, but to recover the mirror. And slowly, the dreams stopped. Not with pain, not with longing, with stillness. He faded, but she remained. Because he was never the destination, only the moment she first saw herself again, through his eyes. And in that reflection, she found the beginning of her return. There are people who vanish from our lives, but remain imprinted in the inner fabric of our becoming. not because we still need them, but because something sacred happened in their presence. They may no longer be in your world, but the image of who you became near them still lives in the body, still breathes in the psyche, still pulses in the nervous system, like the trace of a dream you almost remembered. And maybe that's the truth the soul keeps trying to tell. You were never obsessed with them. You were trying not to lose the self you discovered in their light. What stays with us is rarely the other person. It is the access we found to something vast within ourselves, a forgotten fire, a hidden voice, a moment when we felt possible again. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And Joe Dispenza reminds us, you can't create a new future while holding on to the emotions of the past. So perhaps the invitation is not to let go, but to reclaim, to call home the part of you they awakened, to embody the energy you once projected onto them, to take back the image from the mirror and let it live in your life, not in your longing. Because when someone lives in your thoughts, it's not always about love. Sometimes it's about life force. And the moment you stop chasing the person, you begin becoming the self they once revealed. You don't need their presence, you need their message. And that message is not outside you, it's within, waiting, as a voice, as a fire, as a mirror that no longer reflects outward, but finally reflects you.